numbers just trickling in still. Welcome to what's now our 5th installment of the COVID officer training this year. It's one of the many things that we're asking clubs to do in order to enable us to start college sport, but also DU sport. We have a few slides to take you through. I'm also joined on the call with Mark Bryan, our head of sport, Richard Warburton, who does all our support services for DU teams, and Chris Lennon, who is Team Durham president, but for Michaelmas term is our student support officer for all things COVID. We'll take you through the slides and explain a little bit about the COVID officer role, why it's important, and where this all fits into the scheme of things. To start with, we'll have Mark Bryan give us an update a little bit on where we are with university sport, specifically at Durham, and what we're doing, because this week was actually our first week back in totality, and we're about to welcome college sport back this weekend. I'll then take you through most of the slides with Richard and Chris chipping in, and there'll be an opportunity at the end for you to ask a bunch of questions to get any more clarity that you feel that you need. So these are just some of the things that we're going to go through. Pretty straightforward, but I suppose in first instance, I will mute my mic and pass you over to Mark.
Okay, thank you. I won't take much of your time because I know you've got a lot to get through. Firstly, just again, thank you to everybody that's on the call. We've had, I think, over 1,500 students now go through the COVID training, which is absolutely fantastic, and means that we can get some sport played. So thank you for everybody joining today. As Dave mentioned, this week was the first week we've managed to get some face-to-face sporting activity back on at Maiden Castle, and it's our intention to try and roll some more of that out with the introduction of college sport over this weekend, trials and some training, and then going into next week, beginning to look at establishing what will be a week-on-week schedule for sports, both at Team Durham and at college level. You play a really important role for us and to enable your teams and clubs to participate. So please pay attention. I know we're asking everybody to do quite a lot more than we would normally do in a normal year, but what you do is really important and means the university has confidence that sport and physical activity can take place in a safe way. So I just thank everybody for coming on the call. There's a lot to go through, but we've got plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. So back to you, Dave.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Right, so we'll crack on. Really got to stress that your role is critical to us enabling sport to happen. The amount of things that we had to go through to make Maiden Castle COVID safe, the amount of things that we had to do to prep the teams and the clubs to be able to start training. There's quite a bit, but your role underpins everything. And I can't stress enough that we need to get this right. It is slightly concerning where the last 2 calls, people have left mics on and we can clearly hear conversations, and it seems like the conversations that we hear, they might not be treating as seriously as what we hope. But the encouraging thing for us thus far is the clubs that have been training have taken this seriously and actually done an outstanding job so far. What you see in front of you is just some basic principles behind the COVID officer role. If you've seen the job description, which I'll bring up for you now, it's all included there. Just this, so if you've seen this, and I'm hoping that you have, and been shared through either your colleges or your DU teams, that you have had a read of this and you've seen it before. There's some key roles and responsibilities that you need to do sort of on an everyday basis. It's not difficult. Most of it's common sense, and it's just following the rules. Probably the most important thing on here is our checklist that you would do at the start of a session. You're clearly doing the first one, which is a great first step. It's knowing the symptoms. It's actually doing some briefings, or at least communicating with participants before they turn up. Know your NGB guidance. As I say, all pretty straightforward, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail. But there's things about arriving on site, which Richard will take you through, what to do during the session, what to do after. So it is a useful document for you to always refer back to make sure that you're doing all that you should be. I won't spend a huge amount of time on it because you can find it on a website that we've created, which I'll share that link in that page with you, probably in the next slide or two. I guess some of the key things is our expectations from you. Again, pretty straightforward, but we have to be pretty robust and taking these responsibilities seriously, the types of behaviors we expect to see. One of the key things is probably, I know when we order bullets, you should probably have an order. It's really difficult to do a rank order of these, but the ones that I want to bring your attention to is the last two, where you might have to, and it's difficult with peers, actually be a bit more assertive and give more instruction and remind people what they should be doing during a session. And I guess the awareness, and it's not just the awareness of your own session, but awareness of your surroundings. I'm sure being back in Durham for numerous weeks now, you'll know that the university itself is very cautious and nervous about all of you being back, and in particular doing sport, and the local community even more so. And I think if we're aware of our surroundings and I guess instilling that message with our teams to make sure that people are watching this all the time. They're even watching this when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. So just make sure that you know what's happening around you, and that we're following the rules being put in place. Risk assessments. This almost is a bit of a redundant slide because all risk assessments for our main college sports have been approved now, and they can be found on our Team Durham COVID page. I guess the key one to point out, and then Mark, feel free to jump in a minute because I know you're working more closely with this, but if you're a college boat club, your boat club will need a risk assessment to make sure that the boat club or boat house is COVID safe. And I know we're going through that with estates and buildings at the minute, and our health and safety officer. The activity itself in terms of rowing, that risk assessment has been signed off and can be found on our website and should be shared with the key members running your college boat sessions. Mark, I don't know if there's anything that you feel you need to add specific to boat clubs, college boat clubs.
I think we are progressing with boat club scenario now. I think there's more clarity than we've got. So boat clubs are working with heads of college to get the boat clubs themselves accessible, and then working with us to complete their risk assessment that allows them to actually participate in the activity of rowing. Any issues, just pop them on the chat and I'll be happy to respond.
Okay, and clearly those assessments need to be COVID compliant. If you're from a club and society that doesn't fall part of the college sport program, and is your own college club and society, we're referring you back to your college to get your activity signed off by either your vice principals or principals or senior masters at school or at your college, sorry. We can provide some help. Andy Cattermole's been leading on it from a Team Durham point of view. But I guess the last important thing is to make sure that you've all read and understood your risk assessment, because there's a lot of stuff in each sport one that's in relation to your activity being COVID safe. This is an interesting one. The first bullet couldn't be any more accurate, because it seems to change from day to day, week to week, and certainly from the various times where we've run this presentation. At the moment, we are keeping our webpage up to date with what sports, what they can do, and the protocols. Our local measures for the Northeast still supersede the NGB return to play protocols. So last week, indoor activity was not allowed to take place unless you're all from the same household. And even ourselves as a university took a stance that that activity wouldn't take place at all. Way too difficult to manage. And with us all just returning, we felt, at least in this initial phase of return to play for Durham University, that it was appropriate not to invite indoor sports to take part. We have had a couple exemptions for things like martial arts where they're class-based activities, but even then, those rules are looking to change within this sort of next 7 to 14 days. And we're in fact having a call after this meeting to see what the new measures that were announced by Boris this week, what impact that is for our indoor sports, because it is changing yet again. And we'll be sure to communicate any changes to you and when we'll be ready to introduce indoor sports to Maiden Castle. We have produced a generic template for track and trace that we're asking all participants to fill out. Again, I'll go in more detail in a second about that. But just understand your sport, and this goes back to the NGB guidance. Some sports require you to do more, and specifically, I know basketball, whether it's college or DU, hockey, whether it's college or DU, you definitely need to register with your governing body as well for track and trace. So please, if you've got any questions with that, speak. If you're a college, speak with your sports-specific officer in your college for basketball or hockey, or even a DU club, and they can provide that information for you. And again, I keep referring to the website. We do have guidance for each college sport and the current guidelines on what you're able to do. And I can see those were updated as recent as 2 days ago. First time you come down to train, we've produced a readiness factors checklist, which again is a useful guide that you can access. I'll just find it for you. Sorry. So this is it here. And again, it's just an easy, quick hit checklist to go through. Very similar to the role descriptor. But it's just making sure that your club members, I guess, are doing all the similar things that you're able, that we've asked you to do. We have a track and trace register. And again, I'll talk more about that in a second. But I will stop sharing my screen with that one. And I'll Rich, if you're ready, get you to, if you could, just talk us through the one-way system at Maiden Castle and entering the site.
Bear with me 2 seconds. Afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share 2 documents to look at. The first one is the one-way system for the indoor space at Maiden Castle. This is for anybody taking part in any indoor activity. The entrance point is via the main entrance that you'll all be aware of, in between the cricket centre on the left-hand side there and the new sports hall on the right-hand side. For ground floor access, if you want to get into the old sports hall, it's via the canteen, so through pass reception, via the canteen, and then into the old sports hall as you would have gone in previously. The exit point from there is at the fire exit at the opposite side. That'll pick up the new corridor outside of the new sports hall, and then out the side entrances to the hockey pitches, and you'll pick a one-way system up to take you back to the main car park. Anybody accessing the main sports hall can actually just take a right and just go straight through into the sports hall. There's no exit point there, so it's in the first door and out the second door. And if you want to access the squash courts, which is the only other thing on the ground floor, you still need to follow that one-way system through the canteen and then back into the squash courts and then back out to pick the one-way system down the corridor to the hockey pitches. In terms of upstairs and then castle indoors, might take you a second to get your bearings here, me as well. So you'll come up through. This is the main staircase that you'll come to at the bottom of the main reception. To access things like the gallery and the fence and cell, you'll turn left just before you. So that's the straight on to go to the commercial gym and the upstairs S&C suite. So you take a left. That'll take you through a one-way system through some staff corridors. It's pretty well signposted. Pick up the ergo gallery and the fence and cell or the aerobic studio, and then down the back staircase, and that'll pick you back up on the one-way system past the squash courts and out the building. In terms of the commercial gym and the S&C facility upstairs, it's accessed the normal way up the staircase and through the main entrance into both facilities. The exit point for both is out the back, out the fire exit at the back of the rooms. That'll take you down a back staircase and pick up again that corridor, which will take you to the hockey pitches, which will be a one-way system out. I'm just going to share another document quickly, which is the outside pitches. Hopefully this is a little bit more recognizable. This is the outdoor space, and this is the 177, the main road into Maiden Castle and the main car park. The access points to, so 3G3, which is the track pitch, will be, I should say all the hockey pitches and 3Gs are accessed down the right-hand side of the main building. So you just follow a one-way system, go straight ahead, and that'll pick up 3G3. For the two hockey pitches and the two further 3Gs, you'll go again, just follow the normal route and the normal entrances. But I guess the big change here is the exit points. There'll be the back gates within all of these pitches will take you into the overflow car park and make your way back down. We put in 30-minute blocks pretty much between all bookings to enable to ensure that there's no clashes. But we are still asking, even if you've got a 7 a.m. session, for example, I know it's really easy to park at the back end of the overflow car park to access 3G2 via this back entrance. We're asking everybody to stick through the one-way system regardless of what time of day that session is. The only other thing to mention, actually, while I remember, is the tennis court, and we've got a lot of activity on this space at the moment. Due to a decrease in indoor activity. Slightly more complicated with the tennis court is that you'll follow this one-way system into the tennis court, but there is a little kind of double pathway here where you'll go back on yourself and down what we class as the sprint track, which is an AstroTurf area in between the hockey pitches to pick up the overflow car park. Yeah, I think that covers everything. Sorry, the only other thing to mention, the exit point in 3G3s at the back end of the pitch at the boathouse end, and that'll pick up the side track that'll take you alongside the cricket centre and back to the main car park. I think that covers everything. If there's any questions, I will pick them up at the end. But back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Rich. That's really helpful. And for me, being on site for the first time in 7 months this week, it is pretty clearly signposted, set out for the MC site itself, so it's pretty easy to follow. I think the key thing is making sure people follow those one-way systems both indoors and out, and in a way policing people yourselves not to go against the flow of traffic. One of the things we have been discussing are the grass pitch users. There's not been anything marked out as such yet. We're asking you to use common sense at this stage, and we'll reassess after this weekend. We do have people that are walking the site for basically each time clubs and teams are training, and just to make sure that particularly around the one-way system outside, particularly on the grass pitches, to make sure that the groups themselves are keeping a distance. And the one thing that we'll ask on the grass pitches is that when you are changing over and you're arriving and groups are still there, that you please go to a different area of the pitch that you're going to, and please don't mix with groups. That's the one thing we do ask. It's a big open green space. We should be able to manage that. So if you are entering the site, just make sure that face coverings are worn inside. There is a meeting point outside. So students should meet you before you go into the building, and you should walk them into the building to wherever you're taking part in your activity. If you do have students arriving late, please make the facilities staff let them know about who they are and when they might be arriving, because it is a locked door policy at the minute. Staff are opening and closing the doors. We even have a doorbell on the front door. So it's one of those that people will only be allowed in the building if they're scheduled to be there. During your session, just make sure during break times, water breaks, and any sort of team chats, make sure that you are distanced in your groups, and make sure that you do have regular cleaning breaks for the sports that need them. Those are ball sports such as rugby, netball, another one, volleyball when we get that back on, basketball. Make sure you're taking regular breaks to clean the ball down, clean any equipment, but make sure you do keep a distance during those break times. First aid, you should have first aid kits at each session. Most clubs do have these. If you don't have them, Chris, I was going to ask you to pop your email address in the chat function anyway, for questions, but particularly if you don't have first aid kits and you're a DU club, please contact Chris. For those of you that don't have first aid kits for your college teams, I would refer you back to your college in your first instance. And then we are later this term looking to run first aid training sessions for people, because we need to ensure that we have a little bit more first aid covered than what we normally do. On the weekends, we do have first aiders on site, but weeknights, the only first aiders we have on site are those facility staff that are trained, and they are at this moment in time working to make sure that the building's safe. So please have first aiders there if you have them, that are trained within your club. If you need to do any additional cleaning after your session, such as cleaning goals, equipment, and the like, there are cleaning bottles available at reception. Chris, if you want to just talk a little bit about how people access them. DU clubs, they'll be provided. For colleges, I think in the first instance, rather than give to every single college team, because that would be about 700 bottles, they are going to be given to sport-specific officers to be able to look after that kit and the cleaning of any goals and things like that.
Sure, thanks, Dave. So to collect a bottle, these will be collected from reception from a member of the facility staff. If it's the first time you're using the Sani 4-in-1, which is the name of the cleaning solution we're providing, then you can get a short training from a member of the facility staff. But it's very simple to use. It's simply a case of putting it on whatever you're trying to clean, wiping it, and then leaving it for 3 to 5 minutes, then wiping again. And we've also circulated the safety documents for that. You'll be given blue roll and a refillable bottle, and you take it to reception again at Maiden Castle if you need to refill it at any time.
Thanks, Chris. And then when you exit the site, make sure you finish your sessions on time, so that we can ensure a quick changeover. We have allowed plenty of time so we don't have mixing of groups and the site is clear before new groups come on, but make sure you please stick to your training slot times and you follow the one-way systems that are in place. The track and trace register, the most pleasing thing for this is that we've had about well, over 4,000 people register. Again, I'll take you back to our web page if I can find it. And this is the web page here. And this is the track and trace register. So if we click on it, it is just a very simple form. It takes about 10 seconds. And it just captures basic information so that if at a college or DU session, if someone becomes infected or tested positive soon after the session, we can do our own contact tracing. There's a code of conduct here that we're asking all participants to read, sign, and follow when they're participating in their activity. And then there's a little statement about GDPR and how we'll store the information to make sure your data is safe. We will not be providing lists of, we will not providing lists to people about who has completed this form. Sorry, I just want to go back to the slides. Once you complete the form, there is an option or a box to tick to get an email receipt. What we are asking is that you check as COVID officers before anyone attends their first session, that they show you that they've completed the form with the email receipt that they've got. They need to have done this before they start to play. And that's what we're pretty robust and strict on that. I think the key thing to understand is a lot of you on this call, a lot of the people that participate in your teams will play on multiple teams. Some will play DU and a college team. Some will play on 2, 3, 4, 5 different college teams. For each activity that you do, you'll need to complete a form. And I know it's a little bit laborious. It does only take 10 seconds, but if you're as I say, a DU footballer or DU hockey player and you play college netball, then you need to complete a form for each. So that is something that please make sure that when someone says that they've completed it for your sport as well and your team. We've already started performing some spot checks. We will do this a bit more as we're up and running, just to make sure that everyone has done this. And I think with all breaches or all sort of concerns with people not following protocols, this is a one strike and you're out policy. We need to enable the sport to carry on and the activity to carry on. So again, this is one of the main responsibilities that we ask that you're really on top of. There are NHS track and trace QR codes around the building, also outside, for as useful as that app is at the minute. We do advise that you check in at each session for that as well. Just some other important things to go through. That if there's any stuff that's not covered in the guidance that we send out, and again, specific to sports, hockey seems to be one of the most strict sports, that you make sure that additional forms are completed for your sport. And on the NGB website, you should really know beforehand who's isolating, who's positive, who's able to train. That's really important. If people are demonstrating any sort of symptoms, they really shouldn't turn up. And some sports need to perform temperature checks, and this is something that we're still working on because the handheld thermometers that we've got tend to work inside but not work outside. So for the indoor sports, we're absolutely fine. There's 2 at reception. We are working to get some more thermometers that are able to work outside. At the minute, it's really difficult to tell when you do a search on handheld thermometers to find out if they actually perform that role. But it's your role as COVID officer to perform the temperature check if your sport requires it. You should keep an attendance register for each session. You should record who has attended, the date and time of your session, and what type of session it was. So if it's a DU team and it's an S&C session, please make sure that you say it was an S&C session and which gym it was, either upstairs or downstairs, or S&C room A or B. If it was an erg session, make sure you list the erg session or pitch session or court session or whatever it may be. These can be kept in any way you see fit. That's easy for you to store them and forward to us if you should need to, and you need to keep them for 21 days. We don't have a template for this because everyone works differently, and some people find whatever various bits of technology to work easy. Some people still, believe it or not, are like dinosaurs like myself and may even work off paper copies, but you do need to keep them for 21 days. And again, know your sport, because some sports have to submit their registers after their session. If you do have a suspected case in the club or after your session, please report it immediately. We've had 1 or 2 this week, and that's worked very well. You should submit the attendance register for the infected participant where they attended. I think we're still sending these through to Carol Walker, who's managing anything with Chris. But feel free to use that email address that Chris provided in the chat function. You all as students will have received guidance on reporting a case from the university, and you should also, if a student who's participating in your activity tests positive, make sure that they report it to the university through Banner. I think, and colleagues on the call who, these are some additional slides because as we're having activity return back to Durham, things change, and these next 3 slides, we didn't provide this at the previous COVID training and feel it's really important that we get the guidance that you give correct. And I guess the most pleasing thing for us at this stage is even the clubs themselves, where they've had positive cases in their clubs, have been ultra cautious. It has had a sort of adverse effect in how it's affected those living in at college, where people are potentially isolating where they don't need to. So I think it's really important that you take note of these slides and make sure you know exactly what to do. So if you do have someone that's COVID positive, that isolation period is a 10-day period from when the symptoms start. And if you are tested and that test shows positive, that test will determine how long you stay at home and self-isolate. But the advice that the NHS people are giving after a positive test tend to be from 10 days from when your symptoms have started. If you're waiting to be tested and you've got symptoms, please stay at home. They should be isolating and wait for your appointment. Again, that isolation period in a lot of cases tends to be backdated. The positives tests are, if you are positive, it is a 10-day, not 14-day isolation that you need to complete. If you've had symptoms and your test is negative, then you can stop isolating as long as you're feeling okay. And again, if you don't have symptoms but you're positive, you still can transmit it. You all know that. Please stay at home for that 10-day period. And if you continue to, or if you develop symptoms having been asymptomatic but tested positive, you must restart your 10-day period from when your symptoms started. Hopefully that made sense. The next 2, and this is where we need to get this right. And I've had this even with my own club, that if you are living in the same household with someone that's COVID positive, it's a 14-day isolation period that you need to complete, or you need to advise your team members to complete from the day the first person had their symptoms, not from the date of the positive test. If you don't have symptoms, please don't clog up the testing system. You don't need a test. Only arrange a test if you've got symptoms. And again, if you do develop symptoms, your test is positive, it's just referring back to that first slide and what you need to do. Okay, and then last one, and this is probably most appropriate for all of you. And I think it's really important to understand the protocols that we've had to go through to get sport back on. The reason why sport can take part is it's classified as an organized activity, just like if you were to have a face-to-face seminar, just like many schools going back for full face-to-face teaching. Sport itself is an organized activity that's been risk assessed, and there's various protocols that we follow to participate in a COVID-safe environment. If those protocols have been followed and someone tests positive, whether it be strength and conditioning, going to the gym, or just in the activity itself, people do not need to then self-isolate if they were in the same session as people. You would only follow that guidance. You would only follow that guidance. You start to show symptoms yourself.
No, it's a bit quiet.
Miles, can you please turn your mic off? We're getting a lot of background noise. Because we've had 1 or 2 instances this week with clubs being ultra cautious and reported that where positive cases occurred in a club and advised for that group to self-isolate, which has then had a knock-on effect with other people self-isolating that don't necessarily need to. Clearly, if you do show symptoms, having come into contact with someone at your session, then you need to follow the guidance. But if you don't have any symptoms, you don't need to isolate, you don't need to take a test. Chris, I'm just going to pause for a second because I've read all this for the first time a couple of days ago. I myself am getting up to speed with it. Can you please explain to everyone, even though we're following protocols, that there's a sort of a close contact rule that sports are being asked to follow, and just talk a little bit about what the close contact rule means?
Yeah, so the rule is essentially to do with the length of time and distance that you're in contact. A rule of thumb would be 2 meters for 15 minutes. And most of our sports and their return to play guidance are set up in a way that ensures they stay socially distanced and stay safe. So like David said, if somebody is having to isolate from one of your sessions, that does not mean that the rest of the people who took part in the same session have to isolate. However, if mistakes have been made, if close contact did take place, or if as part of your NGB's return to play guidance, it is possible for close contact to occur with someone who may have tested positive, you should be taking a record of these people. In the majority of sports which have that case, you are isolating into small groups, such as pods, and that should be recorded on your register, which would already be in your NGB guidance. But yes, we would want to know if somebody tests positive and there has been close contact with somebody at one of your club sessions. We would want you to pass that information to us, and the register of those people, and we would want to be able to get in contact with anybody who may have been in close contact with somebody who is COVID positive or potentially COVID positive. Does that help, David?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I suppose this is why we have the track and trace register at the start and the attendance registers ourselves, because I suppose if you've got younger siblings that are in school that are doing their own contact tracing system, when you submit all that information to us, we can then inform you whether it's appropriate or not for people who've been in contact or at the same session, whether they need to isolate or not. But this is just some guidance. And these slides themselves will actually be on our website later today. And I guess in summary, before we take questions, again, it's your role's critical to us enabling sport to happen. For those that have come back already, it's been great to see activity taking place. We've not had no issues whatsoever with how teams have returned already. They followed the guidance and treating it with the level of seriousness that they should do. But you yourselves keep up to date with the info that we're pushing out. We're pushing this out various ways. So if you're a college COVID officer, this is coming through nominated lead COVID officer contacts in your college that we're communicating with. It's going through sport-specific officers in college. It's also going through your college sport and society officer. For DU teams, it's going through club captains and also your nominated lead COVID contact. So we're wanting to make sure that whatever messages we're sending out, we're trying to make sure that you're receiving it, and you may receive it 2 or 3 different times. For us, that's fine because it's making sure that you do have it. If you feel that you're never up to date or you're not receiving those messages, all our most up-to-date information is on our COVID page, which that link is there. It's live. And even if you just click Team Durham into a search box on the university website, we have a link or a hot button right on our opening page for the Team Durham site. But I guess lastly, probably to close with 2 points, always ask questions. Chris is your main point of contact in first instance, but myself, Richard, Mark, and Polly, who's our college sport coordinator, are there to help. We want to make sure that the sport that we've started, we carry on, and it's a big part of your life at Durham. It's sort of in our DNA to participate in sport. We want to make sure that as much of this activity can take place. So if you've got anything that you feel you need to query, please come back to us. That's what we're there for. And I guess before we take questions, yes, sport's starting a little bit later than normally, but it is starting, which is a great thing for us. The university is very committed to where face-to-face activity can take place, that it does. So wish you all the best of luck with your teams this year. And hopefully we do get full seasons in, fingers crossed. But it is up to us to make sure that all happens. So I'll stop now. If you've got a question, we will pick these off one at a time. If you can put them in the chat function, and myself, Chris, and Mark will do our best to answer the questions that you've got. So, first one's come in. Mark, I know we're meeting on this in a few minutes. Do you want to just provide, I guess, some initial guidance for the indoor sports?
Yeah, Dave, thank you. We have had some guidance currently that DCMS and Sport England are working with national governing bodies and Bucks to look at bringing indoor sports back. That we're just waiting for full and final confirmation from the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. And when we get that, we will look to slowly and surely, like we have done all the way through this, in a stepped process, enable indoor or court sports to get back to some sense of training and face-to-face activity. So we've got a meeting directly after this. We're speaking with Bucks to try and find out some further clarification, and when we get that, we will get in touch, we hope early next week, with a planned phase return for court sports.
Lucy, college rowing, again, probably I'll defer to Mark and just see where we are with college boats.
Lucy, college rowing can start when you have passed the 5 university tests to open your boathouse, and you have had your risk assessment signed off in relation to the activity of rowing. So there are 2 risk assessments that the college and the boat club will need to go through. The college will need to help you open your boathouse. And once that's happened, you will need to get approval from Team Durham on your specific risk assessment for rowing. Once that's done, you're free to go under the governing body guidance.
Okay, Kimberly, your question about spotting for lifting. I guess the easiest thing for us to comment on that would be to refer to British weightlifting guidance. They will have some guidance there. If you cannot find it there, please come back to us and we'll get a member of our S&C team that works a bit more closely with that to provide you some guidance. But unless colleagues on the call have any more detailed information, Kimberly, I would refer you back to British weightlifting and see what their guidance is on that.
Yeah,
The only thing I can, oh, go on, Rich.
Yeah, I was just, in terms of the S&C facility currently, so coaches are keeping 2-meter distance where possible. We're putting obviously a lot of activity in racks and benches with the facility to not require spotters. We're just encouraging people to lift the weight they're comfortable with for the time being. We wouldn't expect to have people spotting on benches or racks at the moment.
Yeah, that will be the same as if you went into our usual fitness centre and gym. We're not encouraging, or we're not allowing any spotting of any normal gym activity either.
Kimberly, sounds like a good idea to work on technique to get ready for heavy lifting later. Robert, college indoor nets, again, that will fall into the category for all indoor sports. So in a sense, no different than badminton, no different than volleyball, basketball, and things like that. So once we're able to I guess, get more clarity from government, from the university itself on what they're prepared to allow us to do, then we'll communicate about the college indoor nets. Any more questions? Please pop them in now if you've got them. Light on the questions on a Friday afternoon. And seeing our people saying thank you and leaving the call. I gather that we're good on the questions. Orlando, good question. Again, refer back to what the FA say, but the FA guidance will be on our webpage. Most of the socially distanced aspects in football tend to do during water breaks, team breaks, and with regards to spectating. Playing football itself, you're playing a normal game of football. There's stuff around cleaning the football if you use the same one throughout the whole session. So yes. You're pretty much good to go. But follow the guidance that's on our website specific for football.
Dave, that's quite an interesting run around the QR codes and track and trace. I think some of the boat houses have fallen into that difficulty where in order to get a QR code, you need a postcode associated with it. And some of the boat houses don't have postcode attached to them. Still trying to work out a solution for that. If ultimately we can't create one, then you keeping a record who has attended the sessions is then critical. So until we can, unless Christopher, it's anything other than rowing, unless you want to your mic on, or do you want to put something in the chat?
So you generally need a QR code when you're gathering at a facility. If you're using an external facility, they should have a QR code as part of government law. For running, if you're referring to gathering and running in some area in a COVID safe way as a group, you wouldn't need a QR code for that activity.
Christopher, you do need to be mindful of the 2-meter rule, more than 15 minutes, because your activity, if you're doing long distance running, would fall into that, being in close contact with people. So please be sure that you monitor group size, you monitor the intervals that you do and things like that. That's why at competition level, women aren't competing beyond 5K at the minute, and the men, I think women 3K, men 5K. So it's, yeah, just monitor your group and your session, please. Are you taking Amelia's one?
Well, I mean, yeah, Amelia, you're right. We have taken a slightly stricter view on that. And again, that's based upon, I think, what we feel is appropriate currently, and also the university. And some of it is around perception. There are a lot of local people that walk past Maiden Castle and see large groups of students gathering. I'm absolutely confident we are doing that, and you're doing that in the right way and according to the guidance. But often from a distance, it looks like it isn't. So for the time being, we're going to stick to that 30 on a pitch. We will review it, absolutely. Everything is always under constant review. And if we decide to change that, we'll of course let everybody know.
Yes, Lucy, in short, as long as you've put your name and your club and college into the chat.
Don't know if you can put it on your CV as a qualification though, Lucy. Amelia, also, there's just also a stark reality that with over 1,000 reported cases at the university, that there's a bit of a pragmatic approach by us to monitor it. So it's, many people are asymptomatic. It's one of those that we're being ultra cautious ourselves in the first 2 weeks, and we're reviewing at the end of this month, and should it change, we'll let you know. Okay. It's difficult, especially with restricted groups, and you're trying to run trials. We wholly appreciate that, but you've got loads of time before fixtures start. So it's one of those things that take the time to run as many trial sessions as you can to accommodate everyone. Last call for questions. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining. And again, best of luck to you all this weekend that are starting this weekend. And please keep up to date with the info. And as I say, enjoy getting back to doing some activity. Take care.